History, politics, geopolitics, Cold War, and religion. That is the intersection of a fascinating topic on Iran. So, I'm going to do a short series of various topics about Iran, which has become very important these days, as there might be a war with the US and Iran. And today I want to talk about, to start with, why the Shah of Iran fell and why he had to flee Iran in 1979 when the Islamic Revolution of Iran succeeded. So it's kind of surprising because at that time, Iran was a very prosperous country. It had the largest economy in the Middle East, the most powerful military in the Middle East, and its passport was widely accepted all over the world. The Iranians could even go to Europe, to most of the countries, without requiring a visa. The currency was very stable. It was 70 rials to $1, and it was the same for about 20 years. Today, it takes 1.7 million rials to purchase $1. So the country was very prosperous, it was modern, westernized, had amazing technologies and the infrastructure. It was a secular country where women could vote, women could dress whatever they wanted. You had the manufacturing sector was amazing in Iran. They were building their own cars, and their services were widely popular. The U.S. and Europe were friends with Iran. The U.S. even gave Iran a nuclear reactor for learning and testing. So it was a wonderful time, and Iran's GDP had grown 3,300% in just 25 years, from 1953 to 1978. That's a 34-fold increase. It's just unimaginable for most countries if you look at the history of economy of just about any country. So, with all these wonderful things, why did the Shah of Iran's government collapse? So, there were three forces against the Shah. One were the Mullahs, the religious clerics, because they were becoming sort of irrelevant in a secular modern Iran. The Shah had started this modernization program. It was called the White Revolution in 1963. So that freed women from the Sharia law systems. Women were able to go to school. So the Shah, for example, provided free and compulsory education for all children until the age of 14. So that made sure that women the girls and women became literate. Uh, he gave women the right to vote. That was in 1963 as well. And he encouraged women to go to universities. So in the 1970s, one third of all the Iranian universities were female students, and 45% of all the medical students were women, and there were women politicians in the parliament, about 23. and there were women judges. And the Shah also reformed the family system, so wives would have the same rights as the husbands. He banned child marriage and raised the age of marriage for girls to 18. So all of these reforms made religious leaders not so powerful. And also, more importantly, the Shah ended feudalism because before that, 70% of all the land in Iran was owned by either the aristocrats or the mullahs, the religious people. So Shah ended that and he gave the land to the farmers. So the mullahs were very, very angry with the Shah. And one of them was Khomeini. He opposed all the reforms of the Shah. And then Khomeini fled the country in 1964. They talk about how the Shah was so brutal, but if he were so brutal, he would have just killed Khomeini. But he let Khomeini leave the country, and then Khomeini spent the next, 15 years abroad, and he made his comeback. He fooled people with his writings and the cassette tapes. He talked about democracy and how he is going to be different from the Shah. So that was the first group, the mullahs. They turned against the Shah. Number two were the communists. There was a huge, powerful communist group in Iran, which is kind of surprising. But for that, we have to go to 1941. So during World War II, Russia and Britain joined hands and they invaded Iran and they split the country in half. The northern part was taken by the Soviet Union, and the southern half of Iran was taken by the British. And then immediately the Soviet Union created communist parties and funded them. And this went on until 1979. The Soviet Union gave a lot of money to the communists, and the communists became very powerful. It was a very tempting ideology to always talk about inequality and how the workers are being taken advantage of, playing victimhood. And although the Shah did a lot of things, so for example, he helped Iran build a lot of manufacturing plants. And initially, the aristocrats, they did not want to invest in manufacturing. And then the Shah created a public-private partnership where the government would invest some money and would co-create like a joint venture with the aristocrats to build manufacturing. And then the Shah passed laws saying that 20% of the profits of the factories would be shared with the workers. He developed the social security system, pension system, and he built the infrastructure, construction works, highways, railways, power plants. So he did a lot for the poor and the workers. But the communist parties in Iran were actually more loyal to the Soviet Union than to Iran. So they wanted Iran to become a part of the Soviet Union, sort of like the Eastern Bloc in Europe, like East Germany, Poland, Hungary, etc. So they wanted to turn Iran into a satellite of the Soviet Union. So they were never happy with whatever progressive reforms that the Shah passed, how much ever he helped the poor and the workers and the farmers. The communists were always unhappy. And they kept saying that the Shah is a puppet of America. And you can see that the Western liberals and the leftists, till this day, repeat that propaganda, saying that the Shah was a puppet of America. And that's why they also like the Iranian regime right now. So it's the same. Whatever happened in the 1960s and the 70s are the same phenomenons happening now. So back in those days, the Islamists, Khomeini and his mullahs, they partnered with the communists to try to overthrow the Shah of Iran. And it's still happening today. All the leftists, the liberals who cried a lot about Gaza are totally silent about 30,000 plus Iranian protesters brutally killed in January, in just a matter of 2 days, on January 8th and 9th. So there are no protests. There are no, with all these Hollywood celebrities and Greta Thunberg, and all these people are so silent about what's been happening with Iran because they like the Iranian government for the same reason as the communists loved Khomeini back in the 1970s, because that government now stands up against imperialism. It's anti-American, anti-Zionism, anti-Israel. So that is the talking point today, and that was the talking point back in the 1970s. So, so the second group in Iran that played a major role in the overthrow of the Shah of Iran were the communists, funded by the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union also had radio stations just outside the border of Iran in countries like, say, the Azerbaijan. And they would broadcast 7 hours a day, 7 days a week, the anti-Shah propaganda. So they would always find something to complain about. They would keep saying that the Shah is a puppet of Iran, I mean, a puppet of the US. And the Shah tried very hard to please the Soviet Union. He went to Moscow to meet with the Soviet leaders, and later on, he brought Brezhnev to Tehran for a grand reception. So he tried to play neutral in the Cold War. The Shah was very liked by the West, no doubt. When he came to the US in 1962, they had a huge parade for the Shah. Thousands and thousands of Americans lined up in Manhattan on Broadway Street to see the Shah and his wife. Farah Diba Pahlavi, was one of the most photographed women in the world. Like, I mean, probably only next to Liz Taylor. She was very beautiful. She was very classy and smart. She and her husband spoke fluent French and fluent English. They were very smart, philosophical. She did a lot of charity work in Iran. She built schools, hospitals, the orphanages, sports academies, parks, museums. So she did a lot for her country, and she was very popular all over the West. They would go to France, and thousands of people would line up to see the Shah and his wife. They were huge celebrities. They were on the cover page of French magazine, German magazine, Italian magazine, American magazines, you name it. Uh, and the Shah went to the UK. He rode the carriage with Queen Elizabeth. And again, thousands of British people, they lined up to see him. So, but the communists in Iran and the Soviet Union were so mad that they would turn such events as into negative propaganda. They're like, oh, look, he's so popular in the West only because he's a puppet of the West. It's a very ridiculous propaganda, but it really stuck. So the first group were the mullahs, the second group were the communists, and the third group were the young liberals, the students, the young women, the young men who benefited from the modernization and the secularization of Iran by the Shah. So the Shah gave scholarship to 100,000 uh, Iranian students to go study abroad. Right? So this was a great opportunity for these people to become smart and worldly. And half of them went to the US, about 50,000 went to the US, and then the other 50,000 would go to the UK, France, whatever. But what happened was in the 1960s, there was this crazy liberal revolution in the US and the West, right? So these people, the Iranian students, also got swept up in that, right? So they go to America, they study in America with the money from the government, and then they learn about democracy, anti-establishment, and all the liberal ideology. So they would come back and they would hate the Shah, even though he helped them a lot, such as the weird human psychology and politics. So these women, I mean, all these liberal women who were able to, wear Western dress, get educated, go to dance clubs, drink alcohol, choose their own spouses, work, be successful, and have, bodily autonomy, be able to determine their own life. And you would think they would be very grateful to the Shah. No, they turned against the Shah because they wanted democracy. They wanted even more freedom. And even more shockingly, they supported Khomeini because he promised them, he said what they wanted to hear. So he lied, saying, get me in power, I'll bring in democracy, and I will also be against imperialism. I'll fight America, I'll fight Zionism and the Israeli government. And, because at that time, Israel was so powerful that it defeated a lot of the Arab countries in 1948 war, 1956 war, 1967 war, 1973 war. So all these people in the region had a wounded self-esteem, so they really hated Israel. And the Shah, for the most part, he did not join the Arab countries in the war against Israel. Once again, he chose neutrality. So for these liberals, that was a bad thing, you know. So they foolishly supported Khomeini, who, of course, once he came to power on February the 11th, 1979, So the anniversary was just a day or two ago. Uh, so when he came to power, he immediately changed everything, right? He brought in Sharia law. He forced women into hijab and chador, which is like the Iranian version of the burqa. And we'll talk about all the bad things that happened to the liberals and the communists afterwards. Basically, Khomeini totally suppressed them. He killed thousands and thousands of communists. He passed all kinds of fatwas to totally crush the Communist Party and the liberal movement. And that's for another video. But to summarize, the Shah of Iran fell in 1979 because of three forces: the mullahs, communists, and the liberals. All right, so that's about it for now. Thank you. We'll see you next time. Bye.